My son texted, "You're just a burden now." So I changed my will, my insurance policies and his future in one afternoon. The text arrived while I was sitting in the waiting room at the cardiologist's office. I'd asked both of my children, Daniel and Lauren, if either of them could drive me to the appointment. My hands had been shaking lately, a side effect of the new medication, and I didn't feel safe behind the wheel. Daniel had said he was too busy with work. Lauren hadn't even responded. So I'd taken an Uber, spent $20 I couldn't really spare, and now I was waiting alone to hear whether the palpitations I'd been having were something serious. My phone buzzed. Daniel. "Mom, I need to be honest with you. Sarah and I have been talking and we think you need to start being more independent. You're constantly asking us for rides and help with things, and it's becoming too much. You're 68 years old, not ancient. You need to figure things out on your own. Honestly, you've become a burden and we have our own lives to live. Please stop asking us for help unless it's a real emergency." I read it 3 times, each word landing like a physical blow. "You've become a burden." I sat there in that sterile waiting room, surrounded by other elderly people who were also probably burdens to someone, and I felt something inside me crack and then harden. A burden. That's what my son thought of me. The same son I'd raised alone after his father died when he was 12. The same son whose college tuition I'd paid in full, whose wedding I'd bankrolled to the tune of $40,000, whose down payment on his house I'd loaned him, $35,000 he'd never paid back and I'd never asked him to. The same son whose mortgage I was currently helping to pay, $500 a month for the past 3 years, because his wife Sarah had quit her job to focus on herself, and they'd said they were struggling. I was giving them $6,000 a year and I was a burden. The nurse called my name. I stood up on shaky legs and followed her back, the phone still clutched in my hand. Daniel's words burned into my retinas. Dr. Martinez was kind, as always. The palpitations were concerning but manageable with medication adjustments. I needed to reduce stress, eat better, maybe see a therapist about anxiety. "Do you have support at home?" she asked. "Someone to help you manage these changes?" "No," I said flatly. "I'm on my own." She gave me a concerned look but didn't press. She wrote prescriptions, scheduled a follow-up, and told me to call if anything worsened. I took another Uber home, another $20, and sat in my living room staring at Daniel's text. My daughter Lauren hadn't even bothered to respond to my request for a ride. She lived 15 minutes away, but she was always busy with her yoga classes and her friends and her life that apparently didn't have room for her mother. I'd helped her too, of course, paid off her credit card debt twice, once for $12,000, once for $8,000. Bought her the car she drove because she'd needed reliable transportation after a breakup. That was $22,000 I'd never see again. My late husband Robert and I had worked our entire lives, saved carefully, invested wisely. We'd built a comfortable retirement for ourselves, and when he died 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack, he'd left me well provided for. The house was paid off. I had his life insurance, $500,000. I had our retirement accounts, our savings, our investments. In total, I was sitting on about $1.2 million in assets. I'd been generous with that money. Too generous, apparently, because somewhere along the way, my children had decided that my money was their money and my needs were inconvenient. "You've become a burden." I picked up my phone and called my financial advisor, Martin Weiss. We'd been working together for 15 years, since Robert first started planning our retirement. "Eleanor, good to hear from you. What can I do for you?" "Martin, I need to meet with you tomorrow, and I need you to refer me to an estate attorney. It's time to make some changes." "What kind of changes?" "Every kind." We met the next morning at his office. I brought copies of all my financial documents, the ones I'd been meticulous about organizing, because Robert had taught me that knowledge was power. Martin spread them out on his desk. The life insurance policy with Daniel as primary beneficiary and Lauren as secondary. The will that split everything equally between them. The investment accounts that listed them as transfer on death beneficiaries. The monthly bank transfers, $500 to Daniel, $300 to Lauren for her wellness expenses. "I want all of this changed," I said. "Today." Martin looked at me carefully. "Eleanor, what happened?" I showed him Daniel's text. Watched his expression shift from professional neutrality to barely concealed anger. That's unconscionable. "You asked him for a ride to a doctor's appointment?" "That's all. Just a ride. And he told me I'm a burden who needs to figure things out on my own." "And Lauren?" "Didn't even respond. She's been distant for months. Both of them only call when they need something. Money, usually. Or free babysitting for Daniel's kids, or someone to listen to Lauren complain about her life. But when I need something, silence." Martin was quiet for a moment, then pulled out a legal pad. "All right, let's talk about what you want to do." We spent 3 hours going through everything. First, The monthly payments stopped immediately. I called my bank and cancelled the automatic transfers to both of them. Second, the life insurance policy. I changed the beneficiaries to the American Heart Association and the local animal shelter. Daniel and Lauren would get nothing. Third, the investment accounts. I removed them as transfer on death beneficiaries and designated charities instead. Fourth, the will. Martin's attorney colleague, Rebecca Santos, joined us via video call, and we started drafting a new one. The house would be sold upon my death, with proceeds going to fund scholarships for single mothers at the community college. My remaining assets would be divided between several charities I'd always supported but never had extra money for because I'd been giving it to my children. I want a clause explicitly disinheriting them, I said. I want it in writing that this is intentional, not an oversight. Rebecca nodded. We can absolutely do that. Do you want to include a letter explaining your reasoning? Yes. I want them to know exactly why. By the end of the day, everything was changed. My children, who'd been set to inherit over $1 million, would now receive nothing. The money they'd been receiving monthly, money they'd come to expect, to depend on, was gone. And the loan I'd given Daniel for his house? I had documentation for that. Rebecca suggested I could legally demand repayment. How much do you think he can actually pay? She asked. Nothing, probably. His wife doesn't work, and they live beyond their means, but I want him to know I could ask for it. I want him to sweat. I went home that evening feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Powerful, in control, like I mattered, not because of what I could give people, but because I'd finally stood up for myself. My phone rang at 8 o'clock. Daniel. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. A text. Mom, did you cancel the bank transfer? The money didn't come through today. I typed back. Yes. As you said, I need to be more independent. So do you. Figure it out on your own. My phone rang immediately. This time I answered. Mom, what the hell? That money is part of our budget. We count on it. And I counted on having a son who wouldn't call his mother a burden for asking for a ride to the cardiologist. But here we are. I didn't mean... You're taking this out of context. No, Daniel. I'm reading it exactly as you wrote it. I've become a burden. I need to figure things out on my own. Well, you know what? So do you. That $500 a month you've been receiving for 3 years, that's $18,000 I've given you, on top of the $35,000 I loaned you for your house down payment, on top of your wedding, on top of your college education that I paid for after your father died. We had an agreement. No, we had an arrangement where I helped you out during a rough patch. And the rough patch has lasted 3 years. Sarah still doesn't have a job. You're still living in a house you can't afford. And the first time I ask you for help, you call me a burden. Look, I'm sorry, okay? I was stressed when I wrote that. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. You know what's interesting? You didn't apologize until the money stopped. That tells me everything I need to know. I hung up before he could respond. Lauren called 10 minutes later. She'd gotten her monthly deposit cut off too, and suddenly she remembered she had a mother. Mum, what's going on? Daniel said you're upset about something. Did he tell you what he said to me? He said you were asking him for rides all the time and he set a boundary. Good for him, honestly. You do tend to be a bit clingy. Clingy? I'd asked for one ride to a doctor's appointment in 3 months and I was clingy. Lauren, when was the last time you visited me? I don't know. A few weeks ago. Try 4 months. When was the last time you called me just to talk, not because you needed something? Silence. I've been giving you $300 a month for your wellness expenses. Yoga classes, massages, whatever you decide you need that month. That's $3,600 a year for the past 2 years. Do you know how many times you've even said thank you? Jesus, Mom. Are you keeping score now? No, Lauren. I'm finally realizing that I've been playing a game where I'm the only one following the rules. So what, you're punishing us because we have lives and can't drop everything whenever you need something? I'm setting boundaries. Isn't that what Daniel said he was doing? I'm being more independent. I'm figuring things out on my own, just like he told me to. This is ridiculous. You're being petty. No. I'm being done. There's a difference. I hung up on her too. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying their words, kept feeling the sting of being reduced to a burden, an inconvenience, something to be managed rather than someone to be loved. But underneath the hurt, there was something else. Relief. Liberation. The knowledge that I'd finally stopped setting myself on fire to keep them warm. The next morning I made more changes. I called my insurance company and removed Daniel as the beneficiary on my health insurance. He'd been listed as the person to notify in emergencies and to make medical decisions if I was incapacitated. I changed it to my neighbor and friend, Patricia, who actually checked on me regularly. I changed my power of attorney designation from Daniel to Patricia as well. I updated my living will to reflect that neither of my children should be involved in my end-of-life care decisions. I erased them legally and financially from every part of my future. It felt like shedding skin, like becoming someone new, someone who understood her worth, wasn't measured by how much she could give. Patricia came over that afternoon with soup and bread. She'd noticed I'd been quiet lately, had seen the Uber dropping me off from my doctor's appointment. "Eleanor, honey, are you okay?" And I told her everything. About Daniel's text, about Lauren's indifference, about the money I'd been giving them that they'd taken for granted, about changing my will, my insurance, everything. Patricia listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she took my hand. "Good," she said firmly. "Good for you. I've watched you bend over backwards for those children for years, and I've watched them take you for granted. They needed this wake-up call. Do you think I'm being too harsh? Eleanor, you asked your son for a ride to the cardiologist, and he called you a burden. If anything, you're being too lenient. If it were me, I'd have done more than just cut off their money." "Like what?" She smiled. "Well, you said Daniel borrowed $35,000 for his house and never paid it back. I have a promissory note. My husband insisted on proper documentation for large loans, even family ones. So legally he owes you that money, with interest probably. You could demand repayment." I thought about that. About Daniel panicking over $500. About what he'd do if I asked for $35,000. He can't pay it, but he doesn't know you won't enforce it. Let him sweat. Let him realize that treating his mother like garbage has consequences. That evening I drafted a letter. Not a legal demand, not yet, but a reminder. "Daniel, I've been reviewing my financial records, and I've noticed that the loan I provided you in 2021, $35,000 for your house down payment, remains unpaid. The promissory note we both signed stipulated repayment within 5 years, with 3% annual interest. As we approach the 3-year mark, I wanted to remind you of your obligation. The current amount owed, with accrued interest, is $38,185. Please contact me to discuss a repayment plan. Your mother." I didn't send it immediately. I let it sit for a day, making sure this was what I wanted to do. But every time I looked at my phone and saw that text, "You've become a burden," I knew it was. I sent it certified mail. Let him sign for it. Let him see it coming. His call came within hours of the delivery confirmation. "Mom, what the hell is this letter about? You're actually going to make me pay you back? It was a gift. It was a loan, Daniel. We signed paperwork. Your father insisted on it, and I'm grateful he did. Because now I have legal documentation of exactly what you owe me. I don't have $38,000. Then I suggest you figure it out. You're 68 years old. I'm not ancient. You need to figure things out on your own." Those were your words, weren't they? "Mom, please, be reasonable. Sarah doesn't work. We have the kids to think about. You have 2 months to come up with a repayment plan, or I'll pursue legal action. Talk to a lawyer if you think I'm bluffing." I hung up feeling vindicated and slightly sick. This was my son, this was my child, and I was threatening to sue him. But he'd called me a burden. He'd reduced 30 years of single parenthood and sacrifice to an inconvenience he wanted to avoid. So yes, I was going to make him feel a fraction of what I'd felt. 2 days later, Lauren showed up at my door, unannounced. "Mom, we need to talk about this." I didn't invite her in, just stood in the doorway looking at her. My youngest child, 33 years old, wearing expensive yoga pants I'd probably helped pay for. "What would you like to talk about?" "Daniel told me you're demanding he pay you back for the house loan." "Mom, that's insane. You're going to destroy his family over money?" "No, Lauren. I'm enforcing the terms of a legal agreement your brother signed. If he can't afford the house, he should sell it and downsize." "Are you listening to yourself? You sound cruel." "I sound like someone who's finally standing up for herself. You know what's cruel? Calling your mother a burden for asking for a ride to the doctor, ignoring her messages for months unless you need money, taking her generosity for granted and giving nothing back. We've given you plenty. We invite you to holidays when it's convenient for you, when you need someone to cook or clean up or watch the kids so you can drink wine with your friends. I'm not invited as a guest, Lauren. I'm invited as free labor." Her face flushed. "That's not fair. Neither is taking $300 a month from me for yoga classes while I take Ubers to medical appointments because you can't be bothered to return my calls. I have a life, Mom. I can't drop everything just because you're lonely." And there it was. The truth she'd been hiding behind polite excuses. I wasn't lonely, Lauren. I was having cardiac issues. I needed my children to show up for me the way I've shown up for you your entire life, and neither of you could manage even that. So you're punishing us, taking away the money, threatening to sue Daniel. What's next, Mom? Are you going to cut us out of your will too? I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd carried for 9 months, delivered in a difficult breech birth, raised through every tantrum and teenage crisis, and I told her the truth. I already did. Her mouth actually fell open. "What? I changed my will last week. Everything goes to charity. Neither of you will inherit a penny." "You can't do that." "I can. And I did. You want to know why? Because I finally realized that you and your brother don't love me. You love what I can give you. And the moment I asked for something in return, you both showed me exactly how little I mean to you. Mom, that's not, we do love you. Then prove it, without my money, without expectations of inheritance. Show me that I matter to you as a person, not as a bank account, because right now all the evidence suggests otherwise. I closed the door in her face, and for the first time in 5 years since Robert died, I felt like I could breathe. The next 2 weeks were quiet. No calls from Daniel or Lauren, no texts, no surprise visits. At first, I checked my phone compulsively, some part of me still hoping they'd reach out with genuine apologies, with acknowledgement of what they'd done. But the silence continued, and gradually I stopped waiting for it to break. Patricia and I fell into a comfortable routine. She'd come over for coffee in the mornings, or I'd walk to her house in the evenings for tea. She introduced me to her book club. Different from the one I'd been in years ago, warmer somehow. These women actually wanted to hear from me, not just tolerate my presence. "How are you holding up?" Patricia asked one morning as we sat on my back porch watching the birds at the feeder Robert had installed 15 years ago. "Better than I expected. Some days I feel guilty, like maybe I overreacted. But then I remember Daniel's text, and Lauren's face when she called me lonely and pathetic, and I know I didn't. You didn't overreact. If anything, you underreacted for decades." She sipped her coffee. "Have you heard from them at all?" "Not a word. Which tells me everything I need to know. If they actually cared about me as a person, they'd have reached out by now to apologize, to try to make things right, but they haven't, because they only care about the money." My phone rang. Daniel's number. Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Speak of the devil." I let it ring out. A minute later, a text arrived. "Mom, we need to talk. This has gone on long enough. Can we meet for lunch tomorrow?" I showed Patricia the message. "What do you think?" "I think he's had 2 weeks to stew over that loan repayment letter. I think he's probably talked to a lawyer and realized you're serious. And I think he's going to try to manipulate you into backing down, so I shouldn't meet him." "Oh, you should definitely meet him, but go in with your eyes open. Don't let him guilt you into anything." I texted back, "Riverside Cafe, noon tomorrow. I'll meet you there." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining the conversation, kept preparing responses to every excuse or manipulation Daniel might try. But I also kept remembering him as a boy, 12 years old, crying at his father's funeral, holding my hand so tight it hurt. Had that boy really grown into a man who'd call his mother a burden? Or had I raised someone who'd learned to take without giving? Because I'd never taught him otherwise. I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early and chose a table near the window. When Daniel walked in, I barely recognized him. He'd lost weight, had dark circles under his eyes, looked like he hadn't been sleeping well either. Good, the petty part of me thought. Let him suffer a fraction of what I've suffered. He sat down without hugging me, without the casual kiss on the cheek he used to offer when he bothered to see me. "Mom, Daniel." A waitress came by. We ordered coffee. Neither of us touched the menu. "I don't know where to start," he said finally. "Try an apology. That's usually a good place. I'm sorry about the text. I was stressed about work and Sarah had been complaining about..." He stopped, seemed to realize that blaming his wife wasn't going to help. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have said you were a burden. But you believe it. That's why you said it." "No, Daniel, don't lie to me. You believe I ask too much of you. You believe my needs are inconvenient. So when I asked you for a ride to a medical appointment, you saw it as one more demand on your time, instead of what it actually was. Your mother, who raised you alone, asking her son for help." He looked down at his coffee. "It's complicated." "No, it's really not. Either you value me as your mother or you don't. Either my well-being matters to you or it doesn't. There's no complicated middle ground here. Of course you matter to me. You're my mother. Then act like it. Show up. Call me because you want to hear my voice, not because you need something. Stop treating our relationship like a transaction where you get all the benefits and I get all the obligations. That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time you visited me without expecting me to babysit? When was the last time you offered to help me with something? Grocery shopping, yard work, taking me to an appointment without me having to ask. His silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. You know what's really sad, Daniel? I spent 30 years showing up for you. Every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference, every midnight run to the emergency room when you had an asthma attack. I worked 2 jobs so you could go to college debt-free. I gave you money whenever you asked, never questioned what it was for, never demanded repayment. And the first time I needed you to show up for me, you told me I was a burden. Mom, I'm sorry. I really am. But this whole thing with the loan, you're actually going to make me pay you back. You know we can't afford it. And there it was. The real reason for this lunch. Not to apologize, not to rebuild our relationship, but to get me to forgive the debt. You signed a promissory note, Daniel, a legal document agreeing to repay $35,000 within 5 years. It's been 3 years. You've never made a single payment, never even acknowledged the debt until I reminded you of it. Because I thought it was a gift. You're my mother, and you're my son, which means you should honor your commitments to me the same way I've honored mine to you. But you haven't, and now I'm enforcing the contract we both signed. I'll have to sell the house. Then sell it. Buy something smaller. Live within your means. Do what every other adult has to do when they can't afford their lifestyle. What about the kids? You'd put your grandchildren out on the street? Don't you dare use those children as shields. You won't be out on the street. You'll be in a smaller house that fits your actual budget, and maybe that will teach them something valuable about living responsibly. His face hardened. Fine, you want your money? I'll get you your money, but don't expect me to keep pretending we have a relationship after this. Daniel, we haven't had a real relationship for years. We've had an arrangement where I give and you take. I'm just finally acknowledging that truth. Is that what Lauren said? That we're using you? Lauren didn't need to say it. Her actions speak clearly enough. When was the last time she visited me, called me, showed even the slightest interest in my life beyond what I could give her? She's busy. Everyone's busy, Daniel. Busy is a choice. You make time for what matters to you, and apparently I don't matter, not unless I'm useful. He stood up. I can't do this. I came here hoping we could work things out, but you're determined to punish us for not being perfect children. No, I'm determined to stop accepting treatment I don't deserve. There's a difference. Yeah? Well, good luck being alone with your principles, because that's what you're choosing, to be alone rather than having your family in your life. My family chose to push me out of their lives the moment I stopped being convenient. I'm just accepting their decision. He threw money on the table, enough to cover both coffees, which was more than he usually did, and walked out. I sat there for a long time after he left, my coffee going cold, watching other families at other tables, a daughter helping her elderly father cut his pancakes, a grandson showing his grandmother something on his phone, both of them laughing. I felt the loss of it acutely. Not the family I had, but the family I'd thought I had. The illusion that my children loved me instead of just tolerating me for what I could provide. Patricia was right. I'd underreacted for decades. I'd accepted crumbs and called it love. When I got home, there was a voicemail from Lauren. Her voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Mom, Daniel told me about your lunch. I can't believe you're actually going through with this loan thing. You're choosing money over your family. Do you realize how that makes you look? Everyone's going to know what kind of person you really are. Cold, vindictive, someone who turns on her own children over money. Don't bother calling me back. I'm done. I saved the voicemail. Played it for Patricia later when she came over. Notice how she made it about you choosing money over family, Patricia observed. Not about them choosing money over you. Not about the fact that they've been taking your money for years while giving you nothing in return. She said everyone will know what kind of person I really am. Let them. The people who matter will see the truth. And the people who don't see it, they weren't your people anyway. That weekend I did something I hadn't done in years. I went through old photo albums, letters, cards from when my children were young, looking for evidence that I'd imagined the love I thought we'd had. But it was there in every photo. Daniel at his high school graduation, his arm around me, the card he'd written. Thanks for everything, Mom. I couldn't have done it without you. Lauren at her college send-off, the letter she'd written, you're my hero. I hope I can be half the woman you are. So what had changed? When had their gratitude curdled into entitlement? When had I become someone whose needs were burdens instead of a mother who deserved care? I thought about Sarah, Daniel's wife, about how her influence had gradually pulled him away, how family dinners had gone from weekly to monthly to hardly ever, about how she'd quit her job to focus on herself and now relied entirely on Daniel's income and my supplements. I thought about Lauren's string of failed relationships, how each breakup sent her running to me for emotional and financial support, but how my own loneliness after Robert's death had been met with suggestions that I get a hobby. Maybe I'd enabled this. Maybe by always being available, always helping, always giving, I taught them that my value lay in my utility. But that was ending now. On Monday, I met with Rebecca Santos again to finalize some additional documents. Eleanor, I want to make sure you understand what you're doing, she said gently. Once these changes are locked in, once you pass away, your children will discover they've been completely disinherited. That's going to create a permanent rift. There's already a rift, Rebecca. I'm just finally acknowledging it. All right, then let's make sure everything is ironclad. The last thing we want is them contesting this after you're gone. We went through every provision, the explicit disinheritance clause, the letter explaining my reasoning, the designation of Patricia as executor, the detailed distribution plan for my assets. What about your personal effects? Rebecca asked. Photos, jewelry, things with sentimental value? I thought about that. About my mother's engagement ring that I'd planned to give Lauren. About Robert's watch I'd intended for Daniel. About the photo albums and family heirlooms. Everything gets donated or sold. I don't want them picking through my belongings like vultures. If they wanted family heirlooms, they should have treated me like family. Rebecca made notes. That's harsh, Eleanor. So is calling your mother a burden for asking for a ride to the cardiologist. Fair point. As I was leaving, Rebecca handed me an envelope. This came for you from Daniel's attorney. He's formally disputing the loan repayment demand. I opened it. Legal letterhead. Lots of fancy language. But the gist was simple. Daniel was claiming the loan was actually a gift, that the promissory note was signed under duress, that I was acting in bad faith by demanding repayment. Can he do this? I asked. He can try, but we have his signature on a legal document that explicitly calls it a loan, with repayment terms and interest rates, unless he can prove duress. Which he can't, because your late husband was the one who insisted on the documentation, and Daniel was already an adult when he signed it. He doesn't have a leg to stand on. So what happens now? Now we respond. We offer him two choices: work out a reasonable repayment plan, or we file a lawsuit and put a lien on his house. Do it. File the response. That evening I went to Patricia's for dinner. Her husband George had made his famous chili, and their daughter Rachel was visiting from out of state. It was warm and loud, and exactly what I needed. A reminder that family could be something other than obligation and resentment. Rachel asked about my children, and I found myself telling the truth about the text, about the money, about the lawsuit, and the changed will. Good for you, Rachel said firmly. She was in her 40s, a therapist, someone who understood complicated family dynamics. I work with elderly clients all the time who are abused by their adult children. Financial abuse, emotional manipulation, isolation. What you're describing is textbook exploitation. It feels dramatic to call it abuse. That's because we're conditioned to think abuse only counts if it's violent or obviously cruel. But taking someone's money while giving nothing back, calling them a burden for having needs, that's absolutely abuse. And you're right to protect yourself. It helped hearing it from someone objective, someone who didn't have skin in the game but could see the situation clearly. When I got home that night, there were 7 missed calls from Daniel and 3 from Lauren. No voicemails, just the calls themselves, like they thought I'd see the number and feel compelled to answer. I blocked both numbers. Not permanently, but for now. I needed space to heal, to adjust to this new reality where I had children, but no longer had their presence in my life. Patricia had told me once that grief wasn't just about death. It was about losing anything you thought you had, and I was grieving the relationship I'd thought I had with my children, grieving the future I'd imagined where they'd take care of me the way I'd taken care of them. But underneath the grief was something else. Peace. The peace of no longer pretending, no longer performing, no longer contorting myself to earn love that should have been freely given. I'd spent 68 years being useful to people. Maybe it was time to just be. 2 weeks later, a certified letter arrived. Daniel's attorney had responded to our response, offering a settlement. Daniel would pay $5,000 and consider the debt satisfied. $5,000 out of $38,000. I called Rebecca. What do you think? I think he's testing to see if you'll blink first. I think he's betting on you being a mother who can't stand to hurt her child, even when her child has hurt her. The question is, are you going to prove him right? No, I said. Counter with the full amount, payment plan over 2 years, or we file the lawsuit. That's going to escalate things considerably. Good. Let it escalate. I'm done being the one who always backs down. The lawsuit was filed 3 days later, and with it I crossed a line I'd never imagined crossing, taking my own son to court. But as Patricia said when I told her, some lines need to be crossed. Some boundaries need to be defended. Some people need to learn that there are consequences to treating people like they're disposable, even when those people are your own children, especially when those people are your own children. The lawsuit moved slowly, as these things do. Discovery, depositions, motions filed and countered. Daniel's lawyer tried every angle, claiming the promissory note was invalid, that I'd coerced him into signing it, that the loan was actually a gift disguised as a loan to avoid tax implications. None of it stuck. Robert had been meticulous about documentation, and the promissory note was airtight. Daniel's signature, witnessed and notarized, clear repayment terms, interest rates that were actually generous, 3% when market rates were higher. 3 months into the proceedings, Rebecca called with news. Daniel's attorney wants to settle, full amount. Payment plan over 18 months. He's finally realized he can't win this. What about the interest that's been accruing? We can include that. With the additional 3 months of interest, we're looking at $39,200. I thought about accepting it, about ending this nightmare and moving on with my life. But then I remembered that text message. You've become a burden. Counter with 12 months. I want this over with faster, and I want the first payment within 30 days. Eleanor, that's aggressive. That's over $3,000 a month. He might not be able to. Then he can sell the house. That's what he threatened would happen, right? Let him make good on his threat. The counter went out. Daniel's response came back within days. Agreement to the 12-month payment plan. First payment due in 30 days. I'd won. Sort of. I'd get my money back. But I'd lost both of my children in the process. Some days that felt like a victory. Other days it felt like the loneliest thing in the world. I unblocked their numbers after the settlement was signed, some part of me still hoping one of them would reach out. Not about money, not about the lawsuit, but just to say they missed me, they were sorry, they wanted to try again. The first payment came through on schedule. $3,200 appeared in my account. No note, no message, just the money. Transferred coldly through the bank. I stared at those numbers and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just emptiness. Patricia found me crying in my kitchen that afternoon. "Oh, honey, what happened? I won. The payment came through. Daniel's paying me back just like I demanded." "Then why are you crying?" "Because I'd rather have my son than the money. I'd rather have a relationship with my children than be right about them using me. I'd rather—" My voice broke. "I'd rather they'd loved me." Patricia held me while I sobbed. "I know, sweetheart, I know. Did I do the right thing? Or did I just destroy my family over pride? You set a boundary that needed to be set. What Daniel and Lauren do with that boundary is up to them. They could have apologized genuinely, could have shown up for you, could have proved that you mattered to them for more than money. They didn't. That's not on you." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Thanksgivings and Christmases, about birthday parties and school plays, about all the moments that made up a family, about how those moments had seemed real at the time, but maybe they'd just been performance, me performing motherhood, them performing gratitude, or maybe they had been real once, and somewhere along the way, we'd all forgotten how to be real with each other. My phone rang at 2 a.m. Daniel. I almost didn't answer, but something, exhaustion maybe, or hope, made me pick up. "Mom." His voice was thick, like he'd been crying or drinking or both. "Mom, I'm sorry. It's 2 a.m, Daniel. I know I couldn't sleep. I keep thinking about everything, about the things I said, the way I treated you, and I'm sorry. I'm really, truly sorry. I waited to see if this was another manipulation. Another attempt to get me to back down. I don't expect you to forgive me," he continued. "I don't even know if I deserve forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I see it now. I see what I did, what we both did, me and Lauren. We took you for granted. We treated you like an ATM instead of our mother, and when you finally stood up for yourself, I made it about me instead of understanding why you had to do it. Why are you telling me this now, after 3 months of lawyers and lawsuits? Because Sarah left me, and there it was. The real reason for this midnight call. Not genuine remorse, but another crisis where he needed his mother. She left you? She said she can't handle the stress of the lawsuit, the budget changes now that your monthly money stopped, the fact that we have to make real loan payments. She said I chose you over her, and she's done. Daniel, I'm sorry Sarah left. I know that must be painful, but you're thinking I'm only calling because I need something, because I'm in crisis and suddenly remembered I have a mother. The thought crossed my mind. He was quiet for a long time. You're probably right. Maybe that is why I called. Maybe I am that selfish, but Mom, even if that's true, even if I'm calling for the wrong reasons, I miss you. I miss having you in my life. I miss being able to call you just to talk. I miss the person I was when I still had a relationship with my mother. Something in his voice cracked open the armor I'd built, because underneath everything, the anger, the hurt, the justified boundaries, he was still my son. Still the boy who'd held my hand at his father's funeral. I miss you too, I admitted. But Daniel, I can't go back to the way things were. I can't go back to being someone you only call when you need something. I can't go back to giving and giving while getting nothing in return. I know, and I don't want that either. He took a shaky breath. I want to know you, not as someone who can give me things, but as my mother, as a person. I want to ask how your day was and actually care about the answer. I want to show up for you the way you showed up for me. That's a nice sentiment, but talk is cheap, Daniel. You've said sorry before, and nothing changed. Then let me prove it. Let me show you I mean it this time. Give me a chance to be the son you deserved all along. I looked out my bedroom window at the street lamp casting shadows on the lawn. Robert and I had planted that tree when we moved into this house 35 years ago. It had been a sapling then, barely taller than Daniel. Now it was massive, solid, providing shade and shelter. Maybe relationships were like that. Maybe they needed time to grow properly. And maybe sometimes you had to prune away the dead branches to let healthy ones flourish. Here's what I'll agree to, I said slowly. You can call me once a week, Sunday afternoons, 2 o'clock. We can talk for however long feels natural. You can tell me about your life and I'll tell you about mine. No asking for money, no requests for help unless it's genuinely an emergency. Just a conversation between a mother and her son. I can do that. I will do that. And Daniel, if you miss a call without a good reason, if you start making excuses, if this turns into you just checking a box to feel like you're trying, I'm done. I won't give you another chance after this one. Do you understand? I understand. Thank you, Mom. Thank you for not giving up on me completely. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, wondering if I'd just made a terrible mistake or taken the first step towards something better. The first Sunday call came right on schedule, 2 o'clock exactly. Daniel called and we talked for 45 minutes about nothing important. His job, my book club, the weather, a movie he'd watched. It was awkward at times, like learning to talk to a stranger, but it was also strangely nice. He didn't ask about the lawsuit payments, didn't ask for anything, just talked. The second Sunday he called again, told me about his kids, my grandchildren who I barely knew anymore. Emma had made the honor roll. Jack had joined the soccer team. Small details, but he shared them like he thought I'd care. I did care. That was the problem. I cared so much it hurt. By the fourth Sunday, the call started feeling less forced. We'd found a rhythm, a way of talking that felt almost comfortable. He asked about my health, about whether I'd been to any doctor's appointments recently, about whether I needed anything. You're allowed to need things, Mom, he said. I'm asking because I want to help, not because I'm keeping score. I have a cardiology follow-up next Thursday, 2 o'clock. There was a pause. Do you need a ride? The question that had started all of this, the simple request that had revealed how little I mattered to him. I was planning to take an Uber. Let me drive you. Please, I want to. I agreed cautiously, half expecting him to cancel at the last minute, to have an excuse to prove that this whole thing was just an elaborate performance. But Thursday came, and at 1:30, Daniel pulled into my driveway. He got out, came to the door, helped me to the car like I was something precious instead of a burden. At the doctor's office, he came in with me, sat in the waiting room, went back when I was called, listened while Dr. Martinez explained my treatment plan and new medication schedule. Do you have someone at home to help you remember all this? Dr. Martinez asked. I do, Daniel said before I could answer. I'll make sure she takes her medications on schedule, and I'll be checking in regularly. After the appointment, he drove me home and came inside to write down the medication schedule. He programmed reminders into my phone. He asked if I needed groceries, if there was anything around the house that needed fixing. The deck railing is loose, I admitted. I've been meaning to call someone. I'll come by Saturday and fix it. Daniel, you don't have to. I want to. Please, let me want to. Saturday came. He showed up with tools and materials, fixed the railing, replaced a section of deck board that had rotted, checked the rest of the deck for safety. He stayed for lunch. Sandwiches I made, nothing fancy. We ate on the newly repaired deck, and he told me more about his kids, about his job, about Sarah moving out and how the kids were adjusting. Are you okay? I asked. With the separation? Honestly, I think it's for the best. She'd been unhappy for a long time. I'd been unhappy. We'd been staying together out of habit more than love. Maybe this is our chance to both figure out what we actually want. And the kids, they're struggling, but they're also resilient. And I'm trying to be present for them in ways I wasn't before. Trying to be the kind of father who shows up, who listens, who's actually there instead of just physically present. It sounded like the kind of parent I'd tried to be, the kind he'd forgotten I was. I'm proud of you, I said, for trying to do better with them. His eyes got misty. I'm trying to do better with you too. I know it's late. I know I can't undo the damage I did, but I'm trying. I know you are. Lauren was another story. She'd left several voicemails over the months. Angry ones at first, calling me manipulative and cruel, saying I'd turned Daniel against her. Then pleading ones, asking me to call her back, to talk to her, to stop being childish. But she never apologized, never acknowledged what she'd done, never took any responsibility for her part in pushing me away. I didn't return her calls. In October, 6 months after I'd changed everything, Patricia convinced me to go to a grief counseling group she attended. Her husband had died 2 years before Robert, and the group had helped her process the loss. It's not just about death, she said. It's about any kind of loss, including the loss of relationships with people who are still alive. The group met every Tuesday evening at the community center, 8 people, all dealing with different kinds of grief. A man whose wife had Alzheimer's and no longer recognized him. A woman whose adult son was addicted to drugs and refused help. A younger woman who'd been estranged from her parents for years, and me grieving the daughter I'd lost not to death but to her own choices. I told them my story, the condensed version, hitting the highlights, the text message, the money, the lawsuit, the changed will, the tentative reconciliation with Daniel, the continued silence from Lauren. "Do you think she'll ever come around?" the grief counselor asked. "I don't know. Part of me hopes so, but part of me is learning to accept that maybe she won't. Maybe she's not capable of the kind of relationship I need. And maybe that has to be okay. What would it take for you to consider reconciling with her?" I thought about that. A genuine apology. Acknowledgement of what she did. Consistent effort to rebuild like Daniel's doing. But more than that, I'd need to believe it was real, not just another manipulation to get back into my will. "Have you told her about the will?" "She knows. Daniel told her months ago, and that's when her voicemails got really angry. She called me vindictive, said I was punishing her for not being perfect. She never once asked why I felt the need to protect myself from her." The counselor nodded. "Sometimes people can't see past their own sense of entitlement to understand the hurt they've caused, and sometimes the kindest thing we can do is let them go. Letting go. I'd been doing a lot of that lately, letting go of expectations, of the family I'd thought I had, of the future I'd imagined where my children took care of me the way I'd taken care of them, but I'd also been building something new, a life that didn't revolve around waiting for my children to notice me. Friendships with Patricia and the book club women, purpose in my volunteer work at the library, joy in simple things, morning coffee on the deck, walks around the neighborhood, evenings with a good book, and tentatively, carefully, a rebuilding relationship with Daniel. It wasn't what it had been before, and it would never be, but it was honest in a way our old relationship hadn't been. No pretending, no performing, no taking each other for granted. In November, Daniel asked if I'd come to Emma's 10th birthday party. "She's been asking about you," he said on our Sunday call. "She remembers when you used to come to everything and she wants you there." "What about Lauren? Will she be there?" I invited her. She said she's too busy, but Mom, you shouldn't avoid family events because of her. You deserve to be there if you want to be there. I went. It was awkward at first. Sarah was there for the kids, and she was coldly polite. Some of Daniel's friends clearly knew about the lawsuit and looked at me with barely concealed judgment, but Emma hugged me tight when I arrived, and Jack, 7 years old now, almost too big for grandma hugs, but not quite, leaned against me while we sang Happy Birthday. Daniel pulled me aside while the kids were opening presents. "Thank you for coming. It means a lot to them, to me too. Thank you for inviting me, for wanting me here. Mom, I always wanted you here. I just forgot how to show it. I forgot that love is a verb, not just a feeling. You taught me that once, a long time ago. I'm sorry it took me so long to remember." The 8th loan payment came through in December. $9,600 paid back so far. 4 more months to go. Daniel called on Christmas Eve. "Mom, I know you probably have plans, but the kids really want you here tomorrow, for Christmas. No pressure if you're not ready. I'd love to come." It was the best Christmas I'd had in years. Simple, no expensive gifts, just time with my grandchildren and a son who was finally learning to show up. Daniel gave me a framed photo, me and the kids at Emma's birthday party, all of us laughing at something Jack had said. On the back he'd written, "Family isn't perfect, but it's worth fighting for." Lauren sent nothing. No card, no call, no acknowledgement of the holiday, and I was learning to be okay with that, because I'd finally figured out what Patricia had been trying to tell me all along. I couldn't make people love me the way I needed to be loved. I could only decide what treatment I was willing to accept, and build my life around people who met that standard. Daniel was trying to meet it. Lauren wasn't, and that was answer enough. In January, as I was preparing for bed, my phone rang, Lauren's number. I stared at it for a long moment, then answered. "Mom," her voice was small, younger sounding than I remembered. "Mom, I need to talk to you. I'm listening. I'm pregnant, 8 weeks, and I'm scared." And I realized that when I got scared, the person I wanted to call was you, not my friends, not my yoga instructor, not anyone else. You. My heart clenched. "Lauren, I know I don't deserve it. I know I've been awful to you. I know I said terrible things, and I've been too proud to apologize, and I've let months go by because I was angry about the will and the money and everything. But Mom, I'm pregnant, and I'm scared, and I need my mother. 20 years ago, I would have caved immediately. Would have rushed to comfort her, would have pushed aside all my hurt to meet her need. But I'd learned something in the past year. I'd learned that my needs mattered too. Lauren, I'm glad you called. I'm glad you trusted me enough to tell me, but I need something from you before we can move forward." "What?" "I need you to understand why I did what I did, why I cut off the money, why I changed my will. I need you to really understand, not just say you do, so you can get what you want from me." She was quiet. Then, "You did it because we treated you like garbage, because I treated you like garbage, because I took everything you gave me and never appreciated it, and the one time you needed me I couldn't be bothered." "Go on." "You did it because you finally realized you deserved better, because you'd spent your whole life putting us first, and we'd never once put you first in return, because we loved what you could give us more than we loved you." Her voice broke on that last part, and I heard real understanding there, real remorse. "And," I prompted gently, "and I'm sorry." "I'm so sorry, Mom. I've been selfish and entitled and cruel. I've taken you for granted my entire life, and I don't know if you can forgive me, but I'm asking anyway. Not because I need something from you. Well, I do need you, but not like before. I need you because you're my mother and I love you and I've missed you." I felt tears running down my face. "I've missed you too, baby. Can we try again? Can we start over?" "Not start over. We can't erase what happened, but we can start fresh. We can build something new." "What would that look like?" "It would look like honesty. Like effort, like you showing up for me the way I've shown up for you, like me mattering to you when I'm not useful to you. I can do that. I want to do that." "Then let's try, one step at a time. No promises that it'll work, but we can try." We talked for 2 more hours, about her pregnancy, about her fears, about the father who wasn't in the picture, about the ways she'd hurt me, about the ways I'd hurt her by disappearing instead of trying to talk things through. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation, but it was real, and real, I'd learned, was better than perfect. Lauren's pregnancy became the bridge we needed. She called me every week, sometimes multiple times, with questions, fears, updates. I went to doctor's appointments with her when she asked. I helped her prepare the nursery in her small apartment. I listened when she was scared and celebrated when she felt the baby kick for the first time. But I also held my boundaries. When she asked if I could loan her money for baby supplies, I said no. But I helped her find resources, showed her how to budget, connected her with programs that could help. "I'm not saying no because I want to punish you," I explained. "I'm saying no because I love you enough to help you learn to stand on your own feet." The money was never the problem, Lauren. The problem was that it became a substitute for real relationship. She cried, but she understood, and she didn't ask again. Instead, she started showing up in other ways. She came over to cook dinner with me once a week. She helped me plant flowers in the garden. She asked about my life, my health, my book club, my volunteer work, and actually listened to the answers. "I never knew you volunteered at the library," she said one afternoon while we were pulling weeds. "You never told me. You never asked. And I stopped sharing because it seemed like you weren't interested in anything that wasn't about you." "That's fair. And awful, but fair." She sat back on her heels, wiping dirt from her hands. "I think I was so focused on my own problems that I couldn't see past them. I couldn't see that you were a whole person with your own life and interests and struggles. That's exactly it. You saw me as Mom, this one-dimensional character whose purpose was to support you, not as Eleanor, a person in her own right. I see you now. I'm trying to anyway. Will you tell me about the library work?" So I told her about the reading program for adults learning English, about the book club I'd joined, about helping elderly patrons learn to use computers. Small things, but they mattered to me. And Lauren listened like they mattered to her too. By her second trimester, we'd built something that felt sustainable. Not the old relationship where I gave everything and she took everything, but something more balanced, more honest. Daniel continued his Sunday calls religiously, never missed one. He'd started bringing the kids by every other Saturday to help me with yard work or household projects. Emma was learning to cook, and she'd come early to help me prepare lunch. "Grandma, Dad says you taught him everything about cooking," she said one Saturday while we made chicken soup. "He says you used to make this for him when he was sick." "I did, every time. It was our ritual. I want that. I want rituals with you like that." My throat tightened. "Then let's make some. Every Saturday you're here, we'll cook something together. You can learn the recipes and someday you'll make them for your own children." She hugged me tight, and I felt the generational thread reweaving itself. The damage I'd feared was permanent, was being slowly, carefully repaired. In March, the final loan payment came through. $39,200 paid in full. Daniel called that evening, outside our regular Sunday schedule. "Mom, the last payment went through today. I saw. Thank you for honoring the agreement." I wanted to say something. About the money, about all of it. I was angry at first, angry that you'd enforced the loan, angry that you'd cut off the monthly payments, angry about the will. But now I understand. You weren't being cruel. You were teaching me something I desperately needed to learn. What was that? That actions have consequences, that I couldn't take you for granted. that love requires effort, not just feelings, and that you were a person who deserved respect, not just a resource I could use whenever I needed something. You learned all that from a lawsuit? He laughed. I learned it from losing you. The lawsuit was just the catalyst. When you cut me off, really cut me off, not just threatened to, but actually did it, I had to confront who I'd become, and I didn't like what I saw. I didn't like who I'd become either. Someone who'd accept being called a burden just to keep my children in my life. You were never a burden, Mom. I was just too selfish to see how much you gave us, how much you sacrificed, how lucky we were to have you. After we hung up, I sat with those words. I thought about the text message that had started all of this, about how devastated I'd felt reading those words in the cardiologist's waiting room. You've become a burden. A year ago, those words had shattered me. Now they felt like the gift they'd actually been, the push I'd needed to finally stand up for myself. In April, Rebecca Santos called with a question. Eleanor, I need to know if you want to make any changes to your will. Given that you've reconciled with Daniel and are rebuilding with Lauren, do you want to restore their inheritance? I thought about it for a long time, thought about the Sunday calls, the Saturday visits, the genuine effort both of them were making, thought about Lauren's vulnerability during her pregnancy, about Daniel showing up to drive me to medical appointments without being asked. No, I said finally. The will stays as it is, even though they're back in your life, especially because they're back in my life. Rebecca, I didn't change that will out of anger, or not just anger. I changed it because I needed to know my children loved me for me, not for what they'd inherit. And now I do know. They're showing up because they want to, not because they expect something from me. If I change the will back, I'll never be sure their motivations are pure. That's a harsh test to put them through without them knowing they're being tested. Maybe. But it's also the only way I can trust this is real. They have the most valuable inheritance already, a relationship with their mother. The money is going to do good in the world through charities. That feels right to me. All right. The will remains unchanged. But Eleanor, what happens when you die and they find out? Won't that undo all the healing you've done? I'm writing them each a letter, to be delivered with the will, explaining my reasoning, explaining that this wasn't punishment but protection, explaining that the time we had together was worth more than any amount of money. I spent weeks on those letters. Daniel's was easier. He'd already learned the lesson I was trying to teach. Lauren's was harder. She was fragile right now, pregnant and scared, and trying so hard to do better. Would this devastate her? Would she see it as betrayal? But I kept coming back to the same truth. I couldn't risk going back to being someone they valued for my bank account. I'd spent too many years building a life that didn't revolve around their needs. I couldn't sacrifice my peace for their inheritance. Lauren's daughter was born in June. A beautiful, healthy girl she named Eleanor Grace. Eleanor for me, Grace for new beginnings. I cried when she told me, "Mom, you saved my life," Lauren said, holding baby Eleanor in the hospital, not just by helping me through the pregnancy, but by standing up to me when I needed it, by refusing to let me keep treating you badly, by loving me enough to enforce boundaries. You did the hard work, sweetheart. I just stopped enabling you to avoid it. I want her to know her grandmother. Really know you, not the version of you who gave us everything and asked for nothing, but the real you, the one who volunteers at libraries and goes to book club and has her own life. I want that too. Over the summer, we established new patterns. Daniel and the kids every other Saturday. Lauren and baby Eleanor once a week for lunch. Sunday calls with Daniel that had become something I looked forward to rather than dreaded. And through it all, the will remained unchanged. A secret I carried. A protection I maintained. A test they didn't know they were passing. In August, Patricia was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was grim. 6 months, maybe less. I spent every day I could with her, sat with her during chemo, brought her meals when she was too tired to cook, held her hand when the pain got bad. "You've been a good friend to me, Eleanor," she said one afternoon in September. "Better than my own children have been." Her children had visited once since her diagnosis, briefly, and hadn't been back. "Some children rise to the occasion," I said. "Some don't. But Patricia, you have me, you have George, you have a whole community who loves you." "I know, and I'm grateful." She squeezed my hand weakly. "I'm glad you didn't let Daniel and Lauren keep treating you the way they were. I'm glad you stood up for yourself." "Me too, even on the days when it was hard, when I wondered if I'd made a mistake." "I'm glad." "Do they know about the will?" "No, and they won't. Until I'm gone." "Good. Keep it that way. Let them prove they love you without the incentive of inheritance. That's the only way you'll ever really know." Patricia died on October 15th, surrounded by family who'd shown up too late. I spoke at her funeral, talked about her friendship, her wisdom, her courage in facing death with grace and humor. She taught me that we teach people how to treat us. I said to the gathered mourners, and that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to accept less than we deserve. She was my friend, my confidant, my ally in learning to value myself. The world is dimmer without her light. After the funeral, Daniel found me in the parking lot. That was beautiful, Mom. I'm sorry you lost your friend. Thank you for being here. It means a lot. Of course I'm here. You needed me. That's what family does. We show up, he'd learned. Finally, after everything he'd learned. At Thanksgiving, both of my children were at my house. Lauren brought baby Eleanor, now 5 months old and babbling constantly. Daniel brought his kids, and Sarah, surprisingly, who'd asked if she could come too. I owe you an apology, Sarah said quietly. While we were preparing dinner, I was the one who convinced Daniel you were too much, that you were smothering him. I was jealous of your relationship with him, and instead of dealing with my own insecurity, I drove a wedge between you. I'm sorry. Why are you telling me this now? Because leaving Daniel was the best thing I could have done. It forced me to look at myself, at the damage I was causing. I'm in therapy now, learning about my own childhood, about why I felt threatened by a mother who loved her son, and I wanted you to know. What happened wasn't your fault, it was mine. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded and said, thank you for telling me. Dinner was chaotic and loud and perfect. Baby Eleanor cried. Jack spilled his milk. Emma told terrible jokes. Daniel carved the turkey and Lauren made her first successful pie. It was family. Messy, imperfect, real. After everyone left, I sat in the quiet house and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Contentment. Not happiness exactly. I still missed Patricia, still carried wounds from the year before, but contentment, peace with my choices, with my life, with the family I'd rebuilt from the ashes of the one I'd lost. Christmas came. We celebrated at Daniel's house, all of us together again, including Sarah. The kids were excited. Lauren was radiant with new motherhood. Daniel was attentive and present in ways he'd never been before. He pulled me aside while Lauren was feeding Eleanor. Mom, I have something for you. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $39,200. Daniel, what? You already paid the loan back. This isn't the loan. This is everything else. Every monthly payment you gave me over 3 years. Every time you bailed me out, every instance where I took your money and never said thank you. I kept track. I added it up, and I'm paying you back. Not because you asked me to, but because you deserved better than a son who treated you like an ATM. I can't accept this. Yes, you can, because I need you to. I need to know that I've made this right, as much as I can. I need to know that I'm not still that selfish asshole who called his mother a burden. I looked at the check, at my son's face, at the man he'd become through loss and consequence and hard-won growth. Thank you, I said, not for the money, though I appreciate the gesture, but for becoming someone who understands why this matters. I had a good teacher. She just had to teach me the hard way. That night, after I got home, I called Rebecca. I need to add something to my will. A codicil. What kind of codicil? I want to set up a scholarship fund in Patricia's name with the money Daniel just paid me for single mothers going back to school. She'd have liked that. That's beautiful, Eleanor. I'll draft it tomorrow. And Rebecca, I want to include a note in my letters to Daniel and Lauren, telling them that this money, this gift Daniel gave me, is going to help other mothers, that his growth, his change, is creating ripples of good in the world. I want them to know that even though they're not inheriting my estate, their transformation is part of my legacy. I think that's exactly right. I wrote late into the night, adding to the letters I'd started months ago, telling my children that I forgave them, that I was proud of who they'd become, that the year of pain had been worth it to arrive at this place of honest love. I told them that the will wasn't punishment, it was freedom. Freedom for them to love me without the complication of inheritance. Freedom for me to trust that their presence in my life was genuine. I told them that I hoped they'd understand, and if they couldn't, that was okay too, because I'd learned that I couldn't control how people reacted to my boundaries. I could only set them and live with the consequences. And I'd learned something else, something I wished I'd known 30 years ago, that being a good parent didn't mean sacrificing everything. It meant teaching your children to be good adults, even if that required hard lessons, even if it meant temporary loss, even if it broke your heart. I sealed the letters and gave them to Rebecca to hold with the will. You're at peace with this? She asked. I am. Whatever happens after I'm gone, I'll know that I spent my last years with children who valued me for the right reasons. That's worth more than leaving them money. As I drove home that evening, I thought about that text message, the one that had arrived in the cardiologist's waiting room, that had shattered my world and rebuilt it into something stronger. You've become a burden. Those words had been meant to dismiss me, to push me away, to reduce me to an inconvenience. Instead, they'd freed me. They'd freed me to demand better, to enforce boundaries, to build a life that wasn't defined by other people's needs. They'd freed me to discover that I had value beyond my usefulness, that I deserved love that wasn't transactional, that I could survive and thrive without being taken for granted. My children had learned that lesson the hard way, and I'd learned something too, that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, never too late to change the patterns that have defined your relationships, never too late to choose self-respect over people-pleasing. I was 69 years old. I'd lost a year of relationship with my children, but I'd gained something more valuable. I'd gained myself back, and I'd gained children who finally saw me, not as a burden, not as a bank account, not as an endless well of service, but as Eleanor, a person, their mother, someone worth showing up for. The money would go to charities after I died. The house would be sold to fund scholarships. My possessions would be donated, but my children would have something money couldn't buy. They'd have the memory of a mother who loved them enough to demand better from them, who cared enough to enforce consequences, who valued herself enough to walk away when necessary and welcome them back when they'd earned it. They'd have years of Sunday phone calls and Saturday visits and holidays together. They'd have a grandmother who knew her great-granddaughter's laugh. They'd have reconciliation that was real, not performed. And when they opened those letters after I was gone, when they learned about the will, they'd have a final lesson that love isn't about what you leave behind when you die. It's about how you show up while you're alive. I'd spent the first 68 years of my life learning to show up for others. I'd spent the last year learning to show up for myself. And in the end, that was the inheritance I was most proud of. Epilogue. Daniel found the letter 3 days after my funeral. He'd been the one to handle my affairs, to work with Rebecca on settling the estate. He'd opened the envelope in Rebecca's office with Lauren sitting beside him. Rebecca told me later. Well, she didn't tell me. I was dead, but she told my story, and so I imagine it went like this. Daniel read the letter aloud, his voice breaking at certain parts, about how I'd needed to know their love was real, about how the changed will was protection, not punishment, about how their transformation had been the true legacy I'd wanted to leave. When he finished, Lauren was crying. She knew we'd changed, and she still didn't change the will back, because changing it back would have meant we'd never really know if we loved her or her money, Daniel said quietly. She gave us the gift of knowing our relationship was genuine. But she could have told us, she could have trusted us. Could she? Lauren, a year ago, would we have kept showing up if we knew there was no inheritance? Be honest. Lauren was quiet for a long time. No, probably not. Exactly. So she protected herself, and she protected us. She let us prove ourselves without the test being contaminated by expectations. Rebecca handed them the codicil about the scholarship fund created with Daniel's repayment money. Your mother wanted you to know that your growth created something good, that her estate will help single mothers, elderly people, children, all the causes she cared about. She wanted you to be proud of that. I am proud. Daniel said, I'm proud of her for standing up to us, for teaching us what we needed to learn, for loving us enough to enforce boundaries. They sat in silence for a while. Then Lauren said, I'm going to tell Eleanor, my daughter, about her grandmother, about how she taught me to be strong, about how she showed me that love means boundaries, not just sacrifice. I want her to know that her namesake was the bravest woman I ever knew, and I'm going to make sure my kids remember her. Daniel said, not as the grandmother who gave them everything, but as the woman who taught their father how to be a better man. That's a legacy worth more than any amount of money. They left Rebecca's office with the letters, with their mother's final words, with the knowledge that they'd been loved and challenged and ultimately freed. And they understood, finally, what Eleanor had been trying to teach them all along, that you can inherit houses and money and possessions, but the only legacy that truly matters is the lessons you pass down. That being a burden means being brave enough to make people carry their own weight. That sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is refuse to enable their children's selfishness, and that real love, the kind worth having, survives the loss of inheritance, survives hard conversations, survives consequences. Real love doesn't ask for permission to matter. It simply does.